Today on The Riff, Jeremy sits down with Terrell, Caleb, and Janessa to talk about diversity. Thanks for listening. We hope it's helpful. Welcome to another episode of The Riff, and this is one we've been excited for quite a while here. I put this on my calendar in 2024, and here we are. We're having an episode, and I've got some of my friends. I'm going to introduce them to you if you're joining us through the power of video. You might recognize some of them. If not, your ears will perk up when they begin to talk. But let me introduce them. Start with Terrell. Tell us a little bit about who you are, how long you've been at North Point, what do you do around here?
Yeah, so my name is Terrell. I'm a student director at the Springfield campus. I've been attending North Point for about 5 years and going on staff for about going on 3.
Awesome. Single, married?
Oh, married.
Come on. This is my son-in-law, folks.
Yeah.
So very cool. Student director, Springfield. Janessa.
Yeah, I am Jenessa, the Kid Point director at Nixa. Been on staff for 2 years now, at North Point for about 3, and a Missourian for about, I guess, almost 3 years.
Now you're from, is it Northern Cal?
SoCal.
SoCal.
I am a SoCal native.
Okay.
Yeah.
What part of SoCal?
We were in Menifee, so we were like right in between San Diego and LA, like Inland Valley.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Terrell, KC.
Yes.
Yep. All right. Mm-hmm. And then Caleb, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Absolutely. So my name's Caleb. I am the young adult director for North Point, and I've been with the church now been there for about 3 years. I've been on staff 2 years this month, actually.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So that's awesome. And I'm not from anywhere cool. I would say I'm from Florida, but I've been here too long now. So I'm from Nixa.
Well, okay. Now here's the deal. I ran into one of our Nixa campus folk, and we were talking at something, and you walked by. This is probably a year ago, and they're like, "Did that guy go to Nixa High School and play basketball?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, he was awesome." So true, you did play basketball.
About 100 pounds ago. Yeah. Yeah.
You should see him on Saturdays. He still got it.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Okay. So now it's dawning on me that not only do we have people all from different areas from Springfield, outside of Springfield, you're all athletes. So what sports did you play? You played
just basketball.
Just basketball.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you were a bowler as well.
I try.
Yeah,
I try.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Janessa, you were an athlete.
I played softball my whole life till I tore my shoulder.
Oh, ouch.
3 times. Yeah.
Was that like self-induced? What'd you do?
Yeah, just overuse, throwing, not taking care of myself well enough.
Man. And Terrell, you played some sports?
Yeah, the only one I was pretty decent at was bowling now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little football?
Yeah, a little football. Just a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And I played pickleball, and you guys all know that. So, okay. So this, as we release this episode on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, my goal for this conversation is to be able to talk about what this day means, to be able to talk about not only what this day means, but what you all represent a non-white person here on our staff. And what I want to do is I want to have a conversation. What is that like? What has your life been like? And hopefully in our conversation, we're able to get a couple snapshots that will help all of us listening. Whether this is a newer type of conversation or not, we want today, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, to be not just a day off. We want it to be a day of meaningful conversation, of growth, of opportunity that isn't just the day where he's quoted the most on social media, but a day that we can really lean into it. So with that said, I'll just throw this out and let you all respond however you want to, whoever. What does Martin Luther King Jr. Day mean? Is this a big deal to you? Is this something you look forward to in your calendar, and why?
Yeah, so it is a big deal, especially now that I have kids. It's an opportunity to teach my kids that, like, you're different, and they know it. Like, they know they're different. They get remarks about it at school. They look a little bit different, and it's an opportunity for me to teach them that doesn't matter. Like, are you different? Yeah, but that doesn't change who you are. You look different, but you're not. But also being able to teach them the teachings that MLK had, right? So I can teach you about peace over violence. But I can also teach you how to take a stand, because the common misconception of MLK is that he was an extremely passive person, and I don't think he really was. He was very aggressive in his stance for peace. He was very aggressive in his stance for moving forward. And growing up, when I first moved here, I wasn't aggressive in that. I was aggressive in my stance for fighting. Someone said something mean to me. Now we have to fight. We have to talk about it. I get to teach my kids how to be peacemakers, but be like ultra aggressive in the ways that MLK was. So.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to get back to some of that. What else? What does this day mean?
Yeah. Even going off of that, Caleb, when I think about Martin Luther King Day, for me, it's like a day of hope. Right. Yeah. And it's a day that I really reflect. I'm like, okay, we've come so far, but yet we still have so far to go.
So far.
And I'm like, man, everything that they fought for, peacefully, Martin Luther King, man, like we are living in those times that they prayed and hoped for. So it's like, okay, well, what are we doing? What are we doing now to not only honor that, but to continue moving that mission forward? So like when this day comes around, those are the things that's going through my brain.
Yeah.
Now, Janessa, your ethnicity, not being African American, this day, has it always held a significant moment to you as well?
It hasn't held, like, personally for me, a super, like, this big day on my calendar. I think that my parents have done a phenomenal job since I was a little girl, me and my sister, teaching us that we look at each other's hearts. We don't look at each other's color. Okay. I've personally never felt, let me take that back. I have felt different in certain scenarios, but also like being Hispanic, I don't speak Spanish. And so I already feel a little on the outs within my own culture. And so that's kind of an interesting dynamic for me. However, this day holding such significance in freedom, and Caleb, like you said, I have little kids now, and little kids that are, we come from California, so it was a lot more diverse than where we live now. And now in this day, my focus is to teach my kids that our culture is pretty different than the culture that we are primarily surrounded by. But that doesn't mean like you can't be kind. That doesn't mean other kids can't be kind to you. And so getting to teach them things like freedom, like peace, like the constant pursuit of peace. So yeah.
This week, we have these connection cards, and as a staff, we look at these, we pray about these, and sometimes one will circulate, on our message boards internally at Base Camp. And this week, there was one from an elementary student, a gal in elementary, whose prayer request centered around the fact that people were making fun of her skin tone. And it kind of hit a chord with staff, with parents on staff as we look at this and thinking, man, it's so sad that a little child would have this kind of angst inside of them, and that's what they're presenting to God on their request. So my question for you is, at what age, or do you remember a significant moment where you're like, oh, I think my skin or what I look like isn't a win for some people? At what age was that obvious to you?
That was when I first moved here. So I grew up in Orlando, Florida.
Okay.
It's a melting pot of culture. There's Hispanic people, just everything. And I moved here when I was 15, 16. And I learned very quickly the first day of summer school that life was a little different. I think I was in my graduating class, one out of 3, maybe 4 African Americans to graduate. And you feel that. You go to schools, like local schools, to play basketball games. You're the only black guy on the court. You feel that, So I learned
You
quickly.
feel that? You hear that?
Oh, yeah. I remember the first time I was called the N-word. I'll never forget it. It was from a parent. Yeah, mid-basketball game. I'll never forget it. It was the best basketball game I ever played. It's like, thanks for the fuel, but I'll never forget that. And I remember having issues at the school the first few months there, where my dad had to come in and let it be known that if I'm going to continue to be bothered, that he'll be there every day. Yeah. That's the nice way of saying it. But he said it a little differently, but he made it very clear that he was going to be there to protect me. And it was my first 3 months here we had some serious issues of just from me being who I am. So
yeah. Yeah.
I even think about this area, and I think I was sharing this I think I told you two this story about even in Springfield, how I had just an interaction with like a younger kid. This wasn't at North Point, it was outside of North Point. And I thought me and the younger kid was pretty cool. But he's like, I give him a high five, and then he looks at my hand and he's like, Mr. Terrell, why are your hands so dirty? And it's like, I'm 24 years old right now. And I'm like, ouch, you know? And I'm like, this is such a young kid. And I'm like, man, what conversations just may have been missed to where, because I'm like, okay, if he's this confident telling me as an adult, maybe what is he saying at school? And maybe he just doesn't know any better. But I'm like, man, like what conversations could be had? And going to your original question, I think the first time I even realized that was when I was young as well, growing up. So my grandpa, he always lived like in the country parts of Missouri. So like in Warsaw, I don't know if y'all are even familiar with that, but it was to where like in the town he lived in, he was literally the only black guy there. So like when we go to Walmart, Dollar General, all the attention on us, you know, and that's only three things: Walmart, Dollar General, and Subway, you know, but people clutching everything. Like that's just how it is. And I always asked my grandpa, I said, Grandpa, like, how do you do this? And he's just so unique just because of his past. He's like, grandson, I love the attention. So yeah, I was young when I first realized that.
Yeah. Southern California. Did that ever become a thing growing up, or?
I don't necessarily think like the color of my skin made me feel different as much as perhaps like our financial situation being a little bit different than those around me, where specifically in high school, I will never forget, I had a test and it was graded wrong. I'm a 1. That's really tough for me because like I worked really hard, and I just remember my dad, both my parents come from split families, and he's always had to work really hard for what he has. And he taught us that. And so when I approached my teacher, she was like, well, you already got a good grade. And in that moment, it kind of like, I felt like it slapped me in the face, just different conversations, everything kind of clicked, that a lot of people around me, it kind of felt like maybe things were handed to them more than it was to me. So I just don't know if that's specifically where we were living or because it had to do with my race. I'm really not sure. But in that moment, I was like, oh, does not everyone have to fight super hard for what they have? I won't forget that moment.
Let's think about Dr. King, and you talked about, Terrell, you were talking about how we've come so far, but still a long ways to go. If Dr. King were alive today and he had a chance to visit Southwest Missouri, what do you think he would think?
Oh, man. That's hard to answer. Hard to put into context because I'll use my father for example. He told me a story once where he walked through the wrong town in New Jersey, and a cop picked him up, drove him out of town. I was like, "Don't come back through here." That was probably 70s. That doesn't happen today very often. Like it's not like the blatant racism that you'll see often. And I don't know if it's just depending on who it's for. Like not many people call me names anymore, so that's nice. Where I'll see it now is more opportunity, and that being withheld or not having a seat at a table because of who you are, or having to work 3 to 4 times harder to get things that you shouldn't have to work that hard for. So I don't know. Like if you're just walking around, it just might seem normal. He'd probably notice the disparity in population, but like flat out blatant racism doesn't happen often anymore. You see it more in sneaky ways of just, I earned that promotion. I was better than that person, but for some reason I didn't get it.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
So how would you have this conversation with someone who would say, are you kidding me? Like, is with diversity nowadays, it's harder as a white person to get promoted, get into college. And so I hear those conversations. How would you respond to because it sounds like you're saying, man, it's still more of a challenge in a lot of settings. Explain that.
To be honest, I don't have those conversations. I used to, like young me, when my beard wasn't gray. I was ready to battle. I mean, I really was. I was ready to battle to the end, to where we got to the point to where people like, well, we're just going to have to agree to disagree. No, we're not. There's no such thing in my world when it comes to like, I'm going to agree to disagree that racism's a factor. Like there's no stance to that. But I'm also not going to just go back and forth with someone that doesn't care about what I'm actually saying. Right. And that's the thing. If you're going to ask someone as a non-person of color, you're going to ask that person of color their opinion on something, don't have one pre-made. Right? If you're going to ask to learn, don't ask to respond. And I've been in those conversations where people would ask and they just wanted to debate. I'm not going to debate my blackness with you. I'm not going to debate my black experience with you. I can share my experience, but you can't tell me what I've experienced is wrong because you're not a black guy. I know when I'm being followed around in Walmart. I know when the secret shoppers are following me at Target.
I can hear when the door locked when I walk past.
I know, I know it. I know when people clutch their purse. Like I know it. My kids know it. Tamara told me a story once they were walking around Target and Abel, young, goes, "Mom, that guy's following us." And it was a secret shopper. So she's now being profiled because she has two biracial kids, two black kids, right? And they think now she is either low income or something like that. Now he was 4 at the time. He notices people following him. I don't have to argue those experiences. Now, if people really want to know, we can have great conversation,
Yeah.
But if you want to go back and forth, go look in the mirror and argue with yourself, I guess, because I can't do it. It doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think it's interesting. I've been listening to his speech the past couple of days. I've just kind of had it on repeat. And he said, I have a dream that one day my 4 little kids will live in a nation where they're not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And I think it's interesting that nowadays, like you said, it's not as blatant, but that sometimes people still see color of skin as content of character. And that can be tough because they just see skin color and they automatically go to character. On the other end, I have a bit of an interesting perspective because I am married to a white guy who has had people walk up to him and say, I just know you're racist. I just looked at you and I know that you're racist. And he hasn't even said a word to them. And so then he feels like, well, by definition, is that not being racist? Like, you just looked at me and said that I'm racist. And so it's kind of an interesting dynamic of him trying to be peaceful. And also, like you said, there's people on the other end of the conversation saying like, well, is it not more difficult for me now? So yeah, it's definitely, it's interesting. It's an interesting topic for sure.
Yeah. So have you ever experienced judgment racism? I guess judgment based on race would be racism in a church setting or from a blatantly Christian perspective. How would that, is that something that you've experienced?
I've never experienced it. I think I've had a couple people ask questions, mostly out of curiosity, but not necessarily like just being blatant and racist in any way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough because before I got to Springfield, I was at a predominantly Black church. So it really wasn't just like a lot of that. But I will say one of the biggest shocks for me just coming here was just like, and like even now, sometimes I'll be like, hey, don't do that. Is when the term boy is used when like addressing me, I'm like, all right, I'm not your boy. Just because of just like, man, the context of how that word was used, years ago. So I would say that's probably the closest thing that I've probably experienced.
Wow.
In a church setting.
Yep. At the, I used to help lead worship at a church. I was there for years. And we were told once that a family walked out of church mid-service once I started singing a song because I shared on my Facebook that Black Lives Matters. Most of the painful conversations I've had when it comes to race or privilege or anything of that nature are with people that claim to love Jesus. Those are the most painful ones I've had. And I don't know if it's because I expect it to be different, right? Like, I feel like you should have a different heart towards this, so it should be. But those are the ones where people are like, hey, let's go to coffee. I'd love to ask you some questions. And it's just a 2-hour debate on how my life isn't as difficult as it seems, right? Or how I've had to bring myself up from my boot. That's great. I'm so happy. Like, you worked hard. That's awesome. I'm not saying that you didn't, and it becomes an attack. Like, people feel attacked when privilege is brought up. Like, no, I worked really hard and I've earned everything I've had. I'm not claiming you didn't. I just can speak on my experience and the things that I've dealt with and the jobs that I was passed up on, and how hard it is to sometimes go forward. It hadn't stopped me, but you just got to work harder. But it's mainly just from church folk that I've had those really, really tough conversations with.
Yeah. One of the things that surprises me that it felt very political, even especially several years ago during COVID. It seemed like everything was polarizing, including race topics. But the phrase equality and equity, right? So the sense of, well, hey, if the goal of America is equality, that there's no limitations. Does it address equity? And the picture that I'll never forget is if there's a hole in a fence and you got a 6-foot person looking at a 5.5-foot hole, and you got a 3-foot person looking at trying to look at a 5.5-foot hole up there. The 6-foot person says that hole's equal opportunity for all of us, but it's not an equal opportunity. Equity would say give a ladder for the person who doesn't have as easy of opportunity to get access to the thing that's available to everybody. And so to me, that just makes sense. It's true looking historically, based on land ownership, based on finances, based on college, based on different things, that there had been for a long time, if not today, and it might be both, but it was harder to be able to look through the hole. So that's something that I know it's political. That would sound woke to people. I don't feel like I'm woke, but it leads me to this question: how is race a theological issue? Is it a theological issue, and why? The theology of race, is it important?
I think the understanding of it is. I think it's important for everyone to do research on it. I think it should be important for everyone. Yeah. If you truly say that you love people, I think you should want to understand people, right?
Yeah.
And that's where it becomes like really important. Now, on the flip side, it's very easy to become so caught up in race and things are tough for me that you never go anywhere. Which, again, having children, technically my daughter's a double minority. She's a Black woman, so I understand when she likes to have her 9-year-old attitude. The challenge is like, baby, you can't do that when you're 21 fighting for a job, because automatically you not having an attitude is probably going to be seen as an attitude because of stereotypes of Black women. I know that when I walk into a room, I'm 6'3", 300-pound Black man, smile, so that way people aren't like, oh my gosh, what is that? They're going to see my face before they see my character and my personality. So it's always just, I don't smile often, but my New Year's resolution is smile more. My cheeks hurt, but it's working, so, but I just wish people would just understand, I guess, those nuances of race.
Yeah.
My son, he wants hair like Terrell. Terrell's his idol, I guess. So like he loves Terrell. He's like, Dad, I want dreads like Terrell. I'm like, that's great, but know what comes with that. With great hair comes great responsibility, son. But truthfully, like it's those things where the fear of like, how do I protect these kids?
No, I was even just thinking about just like just the scripture of, like, love others the same way that the Lord has loved us. And with that, that's accepting me for who I am and like what I look like and acknowledging that, So it's like, I think something that kind of like ruffles my feathers a lot is when people be like, I don't see color. And I'm like,
yeah, you do.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. I think if you're colorblind, you may still have a few options. I don't know.
Right.
But like, no, we see color, and I see you for who you are, and I love you for who you are. Yeah. And I feel like until we all get to a point to where we can really accept that and live like that, it's going to be very hard for us to take the steps, forward to be where I would love for us to be.
Yeah. One of the things that is probably unique in the Midwest, maybe particularly, is how would someone who is non-white talk to kids who are biracial? What conversations need to happen as a parent to your kids? And maybe for Terrell, it's remembering as a kid, or as you thinking about, giving me grandkids one day, maybe. But I know, Janessa and Caleb, you have kids. What conversations are important that maybe a lot of white people are like, that's a conversation I've never had?
I try to talk a lot about our like culture. That is something that's very important to me, and it's something that like. It's not very present here, Hispanic culture. There obviously are Hispanics here. But like the other day, Ezra came up to me and he was like, Mom, when I'm older, I want to be a real life mariachi. And I was like, yes, buddy, do it. But just encouraging that, and teaching them that just because we do something and other people doesn't mean it's wrong. That you can be different. And it's actually interesting because like, I remember when we first moved here, Jeremy Alvarez asked me in an interview, he was like, this has nothing to do with the interview, but like, how do you teach your kids your culture? And, I was like, oh, this has nothing to do with Kidman, but like, cool, let's chat about this. But I remember in that moment thinking like, my kids probably aren't going to struggle with racism here. They don't look dark. They have blue eyes. And like, but that was a thought that crossed my mind, is like, they're probably not going to have to deal with a lot of things that possibly my dad dealt with, your kids deal with, and Terrell, maybe your future kids might deal with, because they look white and they have blue eyes, but still teaching them that you can look the same and have different culture. You can look different and do things the same or do things different. And you're both still valued, very much so.
Caleb, your kids are at the age where they're probably asking a billion questions a day. What are some of the conversations that are going to be important here now or in the next season that you want to have?
Yeah, there's a lot. The toughest one, my 9-year-old girl, she knows looks different. Her hair is different. It's big, tight curls, and if you don't do anything, it's a Macy gray afro. It's one of those things. And a lot of the time, she wants to straighten her hair to fit in. I just don't let her. I'm like, no, be proud of who you are. But with that, I have a strict rule: nobody touches your hair. We're not going to do the, oh my gosh, your hair is so cute, and like they're like, it's one of those like petting things. What the conversation we had was like, baby, that's your crown, and that's what makes you special.
Wow,
you're different. Don't let anyone touch your crown, right? But it's adding value to the things that make her different is the goal. You have a little bit more spice. That's great. Yeah, that might just be a cultural thing. You're around me a lot. I got a little more spice. That's great. Lean into that. It's okay. Same thing for both of them. You guys your friends are going to do a lot of things that you can't do just because of your skin. So it's not teaching them to act right, or, if you see someone jump off a bridge, you're going to do it. It's not one of those. It's just know who you are and stick to the values that you've been taught, So it's, my greatest fear is my kids get in the car, not because of them getting in a wreck, because what happens if they get pulled over? Yeah. My son's huge. He's 7 and he's a big boy. It's kind of intimidating. Are you going to know where to have your wallet? Are you going to know not to reach? I know that could be whatever. it's kind of scary, how do you respond to someone calling you the N-word? How do you respond to someone saying that? I had Addie's first year of school, someone said she was ugly because she's brown. How do you respond to that? Is your first response to fight? Is your first response to tell someone? Is it to cry and sit in those feelings? So, it's teaching them to be tough outside of home, but be able to come home and be safe.
Yeah.
And have those feelings. So, it's tough. It is tough and it's scary. But it's necessary for me to be able to show the softer side of that. And my first response not to be like, well, let's go talk to their parents, because that's how I feel. Like, let's go meet the kid that said you're ugly. Yeah. I'd love to meet their parents, right? Yeah. But it's more of a, how'd that make you feel? Are you okay? Let's talk about it. And that's new for me. I'm learning just like they are, but those are the conversations and the things that we're trying to instill. And Tamara's a little bit more level-headed than I am, so she does a really good job with that. So, yeah.
Am I allowed to ask a question? Are you the question asker? Okay, Caleb, I have a question for you. So as I have kiddos who obviously are not, well, maybe not obvious if you're just listening, but aren't Black. How would you encourage me as a parent to talk to my kids who they're so small and so they're so curious and they have questions? How would you encourage parents who non-Black parents or whatever, maybe Hispanic or white or whatever race that may be, to have those conversations with their kids? How can kids appropriately ask a question without being offensive, and how do we navigate those conversations?
That's good. That's really good. I'm not going to ask parents to celebrate Black culture,
Sure.
right? Like, you don't have to put a dashiki on, right? I'll never forget. I used to work at Applebee's in Nixa, and me and my cousin worked together, and we're bussing a table, and this little 3-year-old goes, "Look, Mom, there's 2 of them." I'll never forget that, because my first question is, what conversations are happening at home, right? Yeah. So those conversations, really, let's break it down as just science first. What makes that person different? Well, they got a little melanin, right? It's simple. Their hair curls a little different because of melanin. Another one, that's just how God made them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they're people. They bleed the same way you bleed.
Yeah.
They like food just like you do, put their pants on the same way. They're just a little darker, and it doesn't have to be these big, like, philosophical conversations to where it's like, well, we have to make sure we treat them okay or treat them special, because once you start to add them to that, then it separates it, right? How can we just make it one? People are people.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just, like, let's look at science. Some people have melanin, some people don't.
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of it. Yeah. They do. So,
One of the things as a pastor at North Point that I feel is I want us to be a celebration of followers of Jesus in our community. And I don't want us to be open to those who are non-white to come and celebrate the way we celebrate as white people. At the same time, I'm also very aware that I've learned the church and the white culture have gotten along really well in history in America. And so sometimes diversity could be like, oh, we have a couple people up there who are non-white, therefore we had a diverse worship experience today. And where I feel we are really behind the times or I don't know if it's times, behind the goal of what heaven would be, is that diversity isn't people of different races joining a white cultural experience. How can church experience be cultural outside? Like, what are some of the things that you see like, hey, that's kind of a white church thing that we do?
Service is under an hour.
Where's the food after?
Right. Nixa Saturday night. Yeah. I mean, I think some of the expression, would that be something that would be kind of a cultural deal? Is we kind of have a culture where it's I'm just kind of doing the app, filling in, and not a lot of expressing, talking back, which I think that's a cultural thing.
Well, I mean, you probably notice when my mom's at church.
Love it.
You know,
I know where she sits.
She's front, second row.
Second row.
Worship's going.
You better preach.
She's moving. Yeah, so it is different. I mean, it's different. I remember being in church for 4 hours as a child. Like, help me, Lord. But it's different. And those are the things. It's a little quieter. It's a little reserved. But again, that allows you to get out of church in an hour and 15, and instead of keeping people there forever. But also, you talked about diversity, and that was important. And what you do such a great job of is it's not giving people a seat at the table and be like, now be happy. It's giving them a voice, right? I'll never forget. It was a Mother's Day service. You talked about Emmett Till's mom, and you called me, and you're like, "Hey, I want to get your opinion on this. Did I express this? Like, how was this expression of it?" And I was like, "That's pretty cool. Like, that's the voice. I don't want a seat at the table where, like, hey, look, we got a Black young adults pastor. Look at us, we're doing it." No, it's like, hey, I did this, and I want to make sure that represented that well. And like I was like, I'm in the right church. Like, I'm in the right place. So that meant, I mean, I was doing 75 hard. I was on a walk, actually, breathing heavy in your ear. Sorry. But I remember getting that, and I was like, dang, this is what diversity in a church should look like. Not just throwing me on stage should be paraded around, but the behind the scenes of, I'm doing this. Or you had me and Terrell up.
Yes.
That's the voice at the table is what's important. So, yeah.
I agree with that.
Yep.
Well, what we want to do is grow. I feel like as a church, we have some room for growth to reflect the community that we live, reflect the community that we serve in heaven as well.
Yeah.
And so, we've said it this way. I know I read this somewhere that God's heaven is a racist person's hell, because it's going to be one name under heaven. We all bow down, but that's every tongue, every tribe, every background. And so we don't want to create a place that's comfortable for people who make others feel uncomfortable. We want to create an experience that is a full expression of worship to God with the people that live in our community. And so we've talked about this behind, off of a stage, but just so you know that I don't feel like we're there at North Point. I don't feel like, man, we are really leading the way when it comes to expressing diversity and creating opportunities. I want you to know it's important to us. And I know I don't speak on behalf of me. This is true to those who are on the team who serve with you. And so my hope is that as we continue to grow as leaders, as a church staff, and as a congregation in North Point, and the impact, I hope that this whole area, the Ozarks, becomes more and more like that dream that we celebrate on a day like today. So I really appreciate you being having this conversation. I think that's helpful if you're listening to us today. I hope that you lean in and that we learn, man, how do we be curious and kind, and how do we allow our world to grow? And then that allows us to be a little bit more in tune with God. And so I would say also to you, it's not your responsibility to help us grow as diversity. It's not your all's responsibility to help the white people learn better or learn history. We need to do digging and learn and have conversations. But the patience that you've all had in different areas, whether it's individual conversations or as a church or probably even as a staff member, you're like, good grief, we're still struggling with these things. I want you to say, I recognize there's probably been a lot of patience involved. But be you, boldly be you, loudly, because we're going to be more us when you are you. So thanks for the conversation, and let's all grow. So awesome. Thanks again for another episode of The Riff, and we'll catch you next Monday.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Riff. We'll have a brand new episode every week, wherever you find podcasts.